Well, good afternoon and welcome to Florida Repertory Theater's Stage at Home virtual talkback series for Friday, May 15th, 2020. My name is Jason Parrish, your Associate Artistic Director and your host for the afternoon. As always, I want to begin this afternoon by thanking our viewers for signing up and logging in for a sixth week in a row. Thank you so much for your continued support. In the past 5 weeks, Stage at Home has taken you behind the scenes with A Doll's House Part 2, Every Brilliant Thing, and its bold community partnerships. We've showed you how to design a musical, we've talked with the forces behind making new plays in America, and treated you to a jam session with some of the best actor-musicians in the business. The goal of Stage at Home is to deepen your appreciation for the artistry you see on Florida Rep stages, so that when we gather again in the theater, you'll not only marvel at the production values and the performances, but you'll have a better understanding of what it took to craft each and every moment. So whether you're tuning in on Zoom, Facebook Live, listening to our podcast, welcome to the discussion. This week we go inside Florida Rep's January production of Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. This is one of Simon's earliest works, the play that premiered on Broadway in 1963, starring Robert Redford and Elizabeth Ashley as Paul and Corey. The play ran for 4 years and was adapted into a film in 1967, with Robert Redford reprising his role, but this time alongside Jane Fonda. Barefoot in the Park put Neil Simon on the map. He spent his early years as a TV writer for Sid Caesar, but Barefoot in the Park was his first Broadway show, and it began his career as one of the most prolific comedy writers in America, for both the stage and the screen. He's the winner of 4 Best Play Tony Awards, and he went on to write The Odd Couple, Plaza Suite, The Sunshine Boys, The Book for Sweet Charity, the famed trilogy about his life, Brighton Beach Memoirs, Biloxi Blues, and Broadway Bound, also Rumors, and the Pulitzer Prize-winning play Lost in Yonkers, to name honestly just a few. His career spans 7 decades. In 2018, Simon died at the age of 91, and as Greg Longenhagen and I began planning the 2019-20 season, we toyed with the idea of revisiting a Neil Simon play, something from Neil Simon's canon, to honor his lifetime of work. We had produced many of his most famous titles, some of them twice, and we didn't want to revive one, so that left only a handful of iconic titles to choose from. But it seemed like the best way to honor Mr. Simon was to go back to his roots and produce his first great success, Barefoot in the Park. So today's Stage at Home is pleased to welcome the show's director and our artistic director, Greg Longenhagen, and the cast of our January hit, Hannah McKechnie, Brian Hatch, Katrina Ferguson, V Craig Heidenreich, Brendan Powers, and Mike Filipowski. Welcome to Stage at Home. A reminder to our viewers, if you have a question throughout, please type it into the chat window and we will get to it. Also, if you have a question and you're watching on Facebook, you can type it in the comments and we'll definitely get to that. So thank you all for being here, and we'll kick off with some introductions. So to our cast and our panel, if you wouldn't mind starting by telling us who you are, where you are, and how you came to be in this production. Hannah, we'll start with you.
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah McKechnie and I played Corey. I'm broadcasting to you from my parents' house in West Friendship, Maryland, but I'm usually living in New York, which is where I auditioned for this beautiful play.
Excellent, thank you so much. Katrina Ferguson. Oh, let's unmute you first.
I'm unmuted. Hi. I'm Katrina Ferguson, and I played Mrs. Ethel Banks in Barefoot in the Park, Corey's mother. And I'm broadcasting to you today from my home in Morristown, New Jersey. And I'm a New York-based actor, and I was very happy to be down working in Florida on this great play.
Excellent, thank you so much. And next we'll talk to V.
Muted.
Hi there. Tell us who you are and where you're coming from.
Where am I coming from? I'm speaking to you from our new home in Statesville, North Carolina, where we just recently moved. It's quite lovely, and we're grateful to be here. I came to Florida Rep several years back to do 12 Angry Men, which turned out to be one of the most glorious experiences I have personally ever had on the stage, and most of the people whom I've spoken to who were part of that have said the same thing. And of course, that was the point at which I said to myself, you need to establish a relationship with these amazing artists. And so from there, I also did To Kill a Mockingbird, a number of other plays this year. Oh, look, Best of Enemies. I directed Best of Enemies and Damascus and Disgraced. Oh, what a beautiful production. And that's what I've got so far. That's all I can think of because I'm looking at these photographs going, oh!
It's a surprise to everyone.
It was almost as much fun as Barefoot in the Park, I have to tell you. So anyway, there you are. The Inspector Calls. That was a thing of beauty for
Excellent.
which we're all deeply grateful. Right, Brendan? So,
Excellent, V. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brian, if you could tell us a bit about who you are and your history with Florida Rep.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Brian Hatch. I'm broadcasting from my apartment in Astoria, Queens, which is just about a 25-minute subway ride from Times Square. My lovely wife, Molly Hatch, is just over here to my left. You'll recognize us from the 2012-2013 acting intern class at Florida Rep, which is where Molly and I first met. And that was my first professional experience straight out of college. While I was an intern at Florida Rep, we did 3 touring TYA productions. The first one was Schoolhouse Rock, which was actually directed by Jason. The second one was I Never Saw Another Butterfly. And the third one was... What was the third one, Molly?
Schoolhouse Rock, Odyssey Experience.
Odyssey Experience. There it is.
Caught up with you.
There you go. Also, while I was an intern, I had the opportunity to do 2 main stage productions. The first one being Camping with Henry and Tom, which actually opened up the art stage. There it is, Pete Thomason right there. And that lovely mustache. And the second show I did that season was Little Foxes, also with Pete, and there with Mark Chambers. And since then, I've been back 3 times to do professional shows there. The first one was Unexpected Guest. There's Unexpected Guest. The one after that was The Mousetrap, which I was in with my wife. We actually played brother and sister. There she is in the middle there. And then most recently, Barefoot in the Park, where I played Paul.
Thank you so much, Brian. And Mike Filipowski, we'll go to you next. If you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about your background. And your story is a slight bit different than some of the other people we'll talk to today. So why don't you tell us how you first came to be involved at Florida Rep before this production happened?
I started my life up in northern New Jersey. I moved down here in 2013. I was an English teacher for 33 years in the Newton Public Schools. And when I came down here, I was looking for a venue to volunteer. And I started in 2015 as an usher. And I've worked as an usher, and I've worked as a box office will call window ticket purveyor. And I was very fortunate this year to play the delivery man and with Hannah and Brendan on stage at the same time. And it was a great experience. I had a great time.
Yeah, and so tell us about that process. When you got the phone call from me, or late in the fall. So what was that process like from the phone call through to the audition process?
Well, I was very flattered at first, and then I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'd be in a professional production. And the one thing I've got to say about the whole, I had auditioned for the part. It wasn't just given to me, and I was a nervous wreck. And Jason and Greg were very nice and made me wait a couple days till they told me I had the part. But I know that in the in auditioning process, it isn't always an instantaneous or ever an instantaneous. So I was the newbie here, and I had probably butterflies through the first 10 performances before I settled in, but it was a great experience. I'm so glad I got to do it.
Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you in the production, and thanks for being on the call today. Excellent. Brendan, if we can chat with you next. Our audiences, of course, know you very well. So why don't you, I have some slides to go along with it. So go ahead and tell us a bit of a longer history of yourself and your time with Florida Rep. And you can, if you want to, go all the way back to the beginning.
I was born on April 17th, Memorial Hospital in Danvers, Massachusetts. On April 18th, I went home.
But seriously, why don't you unmute yourself there and tell us a bit about the beginning of your journey with Florida Rep. And the question I want to make sure we cover with you is, of late, you've become sort of one of our go-to utility players, right? So this year you went from playing a leading man, handsome leading man in an Inspector Calls, to this part, the telephone man, and then on to A Doll's House Part 2. You've done musicals with us, you've done character roles with us, you were in Mousetrap with Brian Hatch as Mr. Paravicini. So you're sort of embodying this ensemble element at Florida Rep, and that you have a season trajectory that goes from small part to big part to small part again, big part, small part. So talk to us a bit about that process over the last number of years.
Okay, so I came to Florida Rep in 2007 I was living back and forth from Boston to New York. I'd been teaching at a university, Niagara University, prior to that, and I was the artistic director of that program, and I left there to go back into acting. And the first gig I booked was Florida Rep in the fall of 2007. I came down to do Doubt, and it was in that production that I met Rachel Bertram, who played Sister James in that production, and we are now happily married. In fact, this past Sunday was our 7th anniversary, and we live here in Fort Myers, Florida, just 6 blocks away from the theater. So over the years, for the first several years of my Florida Rep relationship, I was an actor sort of working around the country and based primarily at Florida Rep. But then in 2015, I actually came on board in admin, and I started to work in development and community relations and community outreach. And so for the past several years, when I'm not doing something on stage, I'm in the offices helping in those areas. So it's been a very full and eventful several seasons, which has been really cool. And yeah, the opportunity to take on those different roles, you know, whatever they may be, is a delight for any actor to sort of just be handed something and say, what can you do with this? And it's well, as we'll talk later, I mean, a show like Barefoot in the Park is really interesting when you get a writer like Neil Simon. I mean, the quote, smaller parts, I mean, his writing is so great that it's like everything's a gem in his plays. The comic potential is just everywhere. And we had a fun time finding that. So yeah, it's just been great. It's been great to be in, you know, there aren't many theaters in the country with an ensemble. There are very, very few. And so it's a real distinction and a real sort of privilege to be part of a team like that. And, you know, that's a whole episode unto itself, working with an ensemble, but it's been great. And so, you know, and I will say this, is that one of the parts that the benefits of working both in development and community relations is to gotten a chance to know the patrons and the donors more. So I look at this screen right now of all the people who are attending, many of whom I know. It's like, oh, hey. So it's been a great opportunity. In many cases, actors go to the venue, they do their work, they deliver, they go home. On occasion, you may meet a few people here on an opening night or in the hallway, things like that. But Rach and I have had an opportunity to really get to know the Florida Rep extended family of people who have been coming for a long time, people who are here for the first time, and it's been a real treat. So it's a fabulous situation. We're very lucky.
Excellent. Thank you, Brendan, and thanks for bearing with that memory lane slideshow of your past hits. Greg, I think we'll talk to you next. If you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of, I think let's talk about the design process and how we came to the set design that we landed on. And I think if you wouldn't mind talking about how we make our stage, which is so wide and so big, feel like this small apartment, and what that process was like. And also, if you could talk also about the costume design process as well. And I have some images to go along with it.
Sure. Happy to. So when I sat down with Ray Recht, who is the scenic designer on the show, actually a little bit more than a year ago today, we sat down in the spring of 2019, right? 2020, excuse me. And, we talked about the play over coffee, and, what was necessary for the play. Oftentimes when you're working with this type of a script, I mean, it really is a farce. It's a Neil Simon farce. So a lot of in my estimation, if you're going to do it in proscenium, as we did it, a lot of the design itself, in terms of the function of the design, is really dictated to you in terms of what you're going to do. Of course, you can get creative and change some things around, but ultimately, you're trying to create a space for the play to occur. And we looked at that, and we looked at the necessary things. We know we needed a skylight. We know we needed those stairs up into the apartment. And as Jason said, we have a very long stage at Florida Rep in the arcade. And oftentimes when we're working with something that might be somewhat intimate, because this is supposed to be not a swanky apartment by any stretch, we're forced to get creative. And some of that has to do with what we call using things like forced perspective. And if you'll look at the set right now, you'll be able to tell that, that skylight kind of arches up on an angle and kind of, squeezes down a little bit. Well, the space downstage, in terms of where the wall space is compared to the space upstage, is very different. And as you can probably tell, the space upstage, if you were to stand against those windows, you would almost bump your head on that crown molding. So that was part of trying to create the sense of being in a smaller space from an upstage downstage perspective. Now, from the stage right to stage left perspective, we decided to go with some outside windows and things like that to depict the building next door on both sides, to kind of try and give that sense of being squeezed in just a tiny little bit. And we think that helped a little bit to be able to do that. The biggest thing that we had to conquer, if you will, on the set was the stairs up into. And what a lot of people don't know is we went in there, jackhammers a-blazing, and we took out a section of the underside, the down right stage sides, where you can see Hannah entering as Corey right there, downstage right. Underneath all of that, we went down under the actual apron of the stage that was built on there many, many years ago, and created a space, a subfloor, if you will, so that when the actors were arriving into the apartment, it had the illusion, and not just the illusion, it was reality, that they were actually coming up into this apartment. Because Ray and I, when we sat down, decided that the set itself, the apartment itself, is a character in the play. It's referred to continuously. People rail against it, and it becomes beautiful, after Corey's light touches of design go into it. But it was really a fun process. I don't know if it was a fun process for our production team, but it was fun. It was fun in the design and meeting with Ray and coming up with a design that worked.
And if you wouldn't mind also, Greg, talking about the process by which you went through changing the Act 1 to Act 2 scenery. How did you come to that device that you used? And also, what was the decision behind how to break up the show as far as 1 act, 2 act, to 3 act?
Sure. So, the play has been done before where the walls are false walls that they just move. They're like panels that move and let furniture just come into the scene. Well, when Ray and I sat down with the script, we thought that there was certainly enough that was implied by the script that we could defend the choice to bring all of that furniture onto the stage in real time. Oftentimes what happens in a proscenium space when they do that scene change, it's the end of a scene or the act, and they drop a curtain. We have a curtain. It doesn't drop. It trails from side to side. But the problem is that most of the sets that we design are downstage, and including this one, are downstage of that curtain line. So we knew we weren't going to be able to close the curtain and do it. And actually, I didn't want to. I thought, hey, this is a great opportunity for our audiences to enjoy a really creative scene change that could look pretty harrowing to the faint at heart. But when we would get it down and get it perfect, it could be in and of itself a small play. And we were very fortunate in everyone who was on board from the cast, and all of our acting interns who came on board, and our running crew, who were a big part of that, who worked with my young assistant director, Jesse Masari, to help choreograph that and make it a lot of fun. And I think people enjoyed that. I think they enjoyed being able to see that happen in real time.
Excellent. And a question for the actors. What was it like for you to delve into a Neil Simon script? And for those of you who might have done Simon before, a lot of us have worked on some of the later Neil Simons, the Lost in Yonkers, the Broadway-bound Brighton Beach memoir trilogy, Rumors. How was this diving into his first foray? So if anyone wants to jump in on that first, Brian, Hannah.
Sure. He has, the beautiful thing about the playwright is he has so much written in stage direction that we could choose to listen to or ignore. So if like a line kind of felt not quite sure, I could just look at a stage direction and see that like Corey was supposed to be doing it like in a weird accent, and so then I could try that and be like, oh, she's a goofball. And like also a lot of the stage direction, just physically, Corey walks up and is closing the window, Paul is walking across, she steps downstairs, like as she's speaking this specific line, it lent to this really beautiful musicality, and it was really, really insane to see how many answers he gave us by writing those stage directions. And so like sometimes we wouldn't do it if it didn't feel right to our production, but a lot of times it was helpful in unlocking the characters.
Sure. Thank you, Hannah. Brian, anything?
I had done in college, I did Biloxi Blues, which was quite different from Barefoot in the Park. But I think the thing that was interesting coming into Neil Simon is that so much of the humor is Neil Simon has done the work for you. I think, Jason, as you kind of alluded to, he's a master craftsman when it comes to comedy. And if you hit the rhythm right, the work, it's done there for you. The laughs will come simply because Neil Simon knows how to write jokes and he knows how to make them land. So that was the interesting thing, following his guidelines, following his musicality and his rhythm, while at the same time making it your own, which is, the inherent challenge in comedy. The jokes are there. So it's deciphering the clues to bring the comedy out of it while also bringing yourself to the material as well.
Mm-hmm. Katrina, do you have anything to add about diving into this particular Neil Simon? This was actually my second Neil Simon play, and actually my second production of this play. But what I love about his writing is, and people have spoken to this, is that the answers are all in the script. If you just look at the punctuation that he uses, that gives you the rhythm. There's ellipses all over the place, and so you have to kind of figure out what does that mean for this character. But also in this particular play, playing Ethel Banks, who is very much a woman of her time, coming up through the 40s and 50s, because we're now in the early 60s. It's always interesting for me to explore that kind of character, and Neil Simon nails
he nails all the characters, but from my experience, it was just a joy to play Ethel Banks and to have her so clearly defined by the playwright in his writing and the way he crafts his work.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Katrina. Greg, and if anyone wants to jump in on this, Sunny makes this comment, and this goes along with something I wanted to ask about. But Sunny says, please ask Greg to accept my apology. When I heard that he was doing Barefoot, I was dismayed. Passé is what I thought. Fast forward to opening night and we adored it. We didn't stop laughing, and this truly was Neil Simon at his peak. Don't ever ask me for content advice, says Sunny Lovner. Thank you for that. So Greg, if you wouldn't mind talking about, this is a very dated script. It is, as Katrina said, it's of its time in 1963, I believe, is when it came out. So how did you approach this in a 2020 world? And did you make any adjustments to allow for it? And how was that for you as actors? So Greg, if you'll take a bit.
Yeah, very happy. First, I want to say, Sunny, forgiven. We chatted about that before. You're off the hook. Don't worry about that. No, I think a lot of people had that feeling though too, coming in, that wow, this is such a dated play. You know, those who were familiar with it. I wanted to do a play that not necessarily that was dated, but I thought, you know, we had such a wonderful dichotomy of different pieces that we were introducing for last season, and I thought, you know, I think what people really could use right now, and Jason, you and I chatted about this long and hard, is something that's just an escapist piece that takes us back to a simpler time. Now, of course, when you're living in those times, it may not have felt simple at the time, but I think all of us could probably agree that, you know, this is back before, you know, Kennedy was assassinated, right? So we're going back to a time period where things certainly would have seemed a little, more simple than they were today. And that was long before we were dealing with any of this stuff that, you know, that's going on right now. And I just thought that the audiences would connect with that. I think that, you know, many of our patrons grew up through that time, and it might be a wonderful thing to reminisce about, you know, have that kind of wash over our patrons as they took this in physically. Certainly if you look at the costumes, and we could talk about that, but that was the impetus for the title. And to your second question, Jason, we altered a few things in there that were a little too uncomfortable. It was a little bit sexist, we thought, as a team, and we just thought, there's Brian getting that snow. I love that scene, but I loved all the scenes. But there was a little bit of that. See, I felt more like Doc Simon would not have said anything poorly about any of the little tiny small alterations we did, because in the spirit of the play, he was trying to do, I think, what we were trying to do, and he was trying to connect with that audience the same way we were trying to connect with ours. So with that, I think it was a wildly successful in doing what we all set out to do, which was to take people away from Fox News and CNN for a few hours and everything that was going on in the presidency and all the muck raking and mud slinging that we were witnessing in the fall, and just to get a night out and just go back to a simpler time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. And I remember as we were talking about which of these Neil Simon plays we wanted to do, we had talked about Last of the Red Hot Lovers, we had talked about Odd Couple, we had talked about a number of them, but we just kept coming back to this one. And I forget who said it to me, but someone said it to me at some conference and said, don't be afraid of Barefoot in the Park. It still plays. It definitely still plays. It's especially if you go into it with care, which this group did. Any of you actors want to talk about that particular topic about the dated nature and approaching it from a 2020 lens?
Sure. The thing that really surprised me the more that we delved into it, and I think something Greg really tried to hit home for us, is that Paul and Corey are equals, which I think is something that you don't, with material from that time, you often see the man being the more domineering figure and the woman being kind of a wilting sort of flower, but Corey does not back down from the challenge. at all. And she domineers Paul in many of the scenes. And I think that's what's so great about this play is that they feel like equals. And I think ultimately that's why they do end up being such a great pair, is that they're matched so well. But they feel like intellectual and emotional equals. And I think it would have been easy to write Corey, just to write her off, as a flighty sort of airhead sort of character. And she is not that. So that's a testament to, Greg's direction and also to Hannah's performance, because Hannah is the opposite of a wilting flower and an airhead. And she brings all of her, strength and vitality to the role. So that was something really amazing to see, because that did ring true and felt modern to me, that aspect of their Paul and Corey's relationship.
Absolutely. Hannah, did you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. I read this play when I was in college, and I loved it. There are certainly dated parts, but I think at the root of it, it reminds us to celebrate. Corey as a character reminds us to celebrate and get excited and be wacky. And I love that spirit. And I think that spirit in someone I always want to see and be reminded of and re-inspired by. And then I think at the root of the play, it is about, I see it as a way, how to be in a equal relationship, similarly to what Brian was saying. Corey and Paul and Mr. Velasco and Mrs. Banks all lead up towards this craziness, and then they all kind of flop in the other direction. They all go too far in the other direction. They're all polar opposites, and then they all go so far in the opposite direction beyond where they're comfortable. And I think it's just how it shows how to have a relationship. Each person has to give a little. You can be a strong, independent, opinionated person, but in a relationship, you both have to give a little. So that's how I see it. And I still think that is relevant. I recently just got married, and I'm going through some of that stuff myself. Okay, well, I don't want to watch that movie, but I love you, so sure.
Well, to piggyback on that, Mindy from the panel says it might take place in the 60s, but it's not dated. It's about newlyweds that have opposite personalities, but love conquers all.
I love that.
Yeah, thank you, Mindy, for your comments. For those of you, Katrina, Hannah, and Brian, you auditioned for this play in New York City. Katrina, you were completely new to us. Hannah, you had been to some final callbacks with Florida Rep before. Brian, we put you through it on this. So talk to us a bit about the audition process and what it's like to be a New York actor hitting the pavement out there, and how is this audition process different, or is it different at all from anything else?
Well, they give the most sides out of any theater company I've ever auditioned for in my life.
Tell everyone on the panel what sides are, in case they don't know.
Sides are the amount of pages that you have to memorize and come into an audition with. I had a callback for them 2 years ago, and I had 12 pages of sides. It was insane, but it's crazy because I think they're really testing your endurance, and I mean it's amazing. And so finally getting this role, I was just yes, I felt like I won a marathon or something.
Thank you. Katrina?
I remember my audition for Florida Rep because I was really sick. I remember I had really, really bad sinus trouble or something, and I didn't even really want to go to the audition, but you keep showing up. And then when I got there, it was fine, and everybody was so friendly, and it was a really good experience, and I was really excited to be called back, and go to a second audition. And then I waited for a long time, and I had basically given up hope of getting this job, after a certain period of time goes by, and when the production's starting rehearsal, you're kind of well, they should have called by now, and they hadn't. So I was just giving up. I was just okay, well, that didn't happen. And then I got an email from Jason just out of the blue. It was as though he It was as though he read my mind. Checking to see if I was still available and letting me know that they were just about to finish casting. So I was really excited by that, and then I got the offer a couple of days later. But I loved going to the audition. Jason and Greg were a receptive audience. When I was auditioning, they laughed in all the right places.
That's a testament to you, not to
Wait, well,
us.
it makes my job easier, because if people are sitting on the other side of the audition table and just sitting there and not reacting or not even really kind of participating in what you as an actor are bringing into the room, it can be very discouraging. So I know how hard it is to sit there all day and watch actors audition, but we always appreciate it when the auditioners are involved in the room. So I appreciated that.
Thank you, Katrina. And Brian, if you'll talk about your process auditioning for us and other things.
Yeah, sure. So like Hannah said, we prepared 30 or 40 pages of sides.
Wasn't that much?
No, I think we probably had two or three scenes, you know. And we had an initial audition, which Katrina and Hannah spoke to, where, you know, we came in and maybe read with one other person, and then the callback experience is really where you get to kind of delve into the material a little more closely and finely, and then a little more focused manner. And I want to say that I probably read with, three, four, five other potential Corys throughout the entire process, and we went through to giving Florida Rep their due, we do usually cover all of the pages that are assigned. So it does feel like you're getting to do some real scene work, and you know, you really get a feel for your scene partner and whatnot. And I just wanted to reiterate what Katrina said, that Florida Rep's audition rooms are very warm and very welcoming. I've had so many experiences in theater and TV commercial stuff where the room is cold and not receptive in the least, and that makes for a really poor working environment. But when you walk into a room and you feel like they're genuinely interested in what you're bringing to the table, even if you don't book it, it makes for a much better experience. And Florida Rep has always been that way.
Thank you, Brian. Brendan, V, those of you, so you both were rehearsing this play but performing an Inspector Calls at night. And we do that often at Florida Rep, and some of you do it more than others over the course of the season. So can you talk a bit about what that's like to segment your brain from performance mode into rehearsal mode, and how long it takes to set the two things where they need to be, or anything at all that you want to say about the process of overlapping?
Well, I'll defer to V on this, because in this instance, you know, both my role in Inspector Calls and my role in Barefoot in the Park were significantly smaller than his load, which was significant. So, yeah, it's, again, speaking as an actor, when you have an opportunity to do those kind of things in tandem, that's fabulous. I mean, it's a challenge. If it's pieces that you're working on that you really are invested in, you really like, you've got a great team working on it, it's a joy. I mean, it's hard work sometimes, especially if there's accents involved and you're trying to do one in the afternoon and one in that, you know. But it's all part of the joy. But as far as taking on that kind of mountain with Inspector and Barefoot, take it away, V.
Not a mountain. It's not a mountain at all. We do this because we love doing it. We love doing it so much that we do it for the amount of money we're paid to do it, which would be shocking to all of us. And so the idea of getting to do more of it is, at least for me, it's always a good thing. It's a great thing. It's a tremendous opportunity. I grew up in a theater system that had resident companies, and I grew up in the resident company model. So I would be in a city for years and years and years, attached to a theater, where I would be working a 40-week season at minimum, from sometime in August through sometime in May, take 2 or 3 months off, and you'd be back doing 8 shows again the next year. And that particular model is gone. But every once in a while, you have these little flashes where you get to sort of live it, like Brendan is living it, and I was living it for these two. And it takes no time to make the shift, none whatsoever. If you do 8-hour rehearsals and then or a 5-hour rehearsal and a show, or a shorter rehearsal and 2 shows, it takes enough time to get your feet up, perhaps with little toes up and a light snack, and it's rather like getting out of one car and getting into another one and starting to drive it. You will not confuse which car you're in. Or listening to a song and singing along with it. You will not sing a different song unless Katrina were to say something to me from another play, which she could do, and then things get dangerous.
Fantastic. Mike, will you be auditioning for future Florida Rep productions, or will this be your cameo, do you think?
I was hoping you'd ask that. I'm available, just let me know. If you remember what I said to you when I auditioned for this, I played Doc in West Side Story when I was in high school. So, if you need an older gentleman to play that part again, I might come out of retirement.
Well, thank you. And did you tell us in your intro what you did before you came to Fort Myers, your life as a teacher, yes? Oh, you're muted. Unmute yourself. And tell us about that life before coming to Florida Rep, or to Florida rather.
I keep getting a beep. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I taught high school and junior high school English for 33 years. I was a department chairman. I was curriculum coordinator. I worked with the theater program in our high school. I was even, and this is the truth, I was cheerleading advisor for 2 years because they couldn't find somebody to do it. And I couldn't do it either, but they needed somebody to be there for the practices and the bus rides.
Did you win any trophies that year?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But, I loved it. I worked in a great school district, and it was the dream job. When I started out there, I thought, I'll do this for a couple of years and do something else. And 33 years later, I decided to retire. And then that's when I always wanted to move to a warmer climate. And I found my home in Fort Myers, and my second home at Florida Rep, ushering and anything else I can do. So, keep my resume there for the next audition process.
We will, and I'll make a special shout out to your agent Daniel Benzing, who is our
that's right.
Director of Operations. So Daniel has been at Florida Rep since he was a child actor, and started work as an administrator again, I think in 2008, and we were having trouble casting this part. We were having such issue trying to find someone who was local and who had the time available, because this rehearsed over the holidays. And I finally said to Daniel, who among your volunteer corps, and before I even finished the sentence, he said, Mike Filipowski, here's his number. So Daniel is, we owe him that, and you owe him 10%, essentially.
He'll get it someday.
So thank you, Daniel. I wanted also to ask Greg if you could talk a bit about the design process as far as costumes were concerned, and how you and the costume designer got to where you got. And I have some images to show as we go through that. And if you also wouldn't mind talking about your rehearsal process and how you approached this particular process, and if this is are you a stranger to Neil Simon, or have you done some Neil Simon before?
Very good. Those are good questions, Jason. So I'll talk about costumes just a little bit. I mean, when we looked at costumes, we really wanted to find what was reminiscent of the period, as well as what was, like you do with almost any play, what was what was it going to say about the character. Of course, there's the lovely Hannah McKechnie, but you may have a new last name now, Hannah. Do you have a new last name?
No, I'm keeping my name.
All right, good, good. McKechnie, good. That's a good, strong name. I'm glad. I'm glad you're going to keep that for your name. Yeah. So we went through a couple of different variations on things for all the characters. Hannah's was a little bit easier with Dina to put together. And as you can see, several different looks. We wanted to make sure that we had something really, just beautifully colorful for their evening out, for their big double date. And Hannah, I don't know if you remember, but I watched so many, I watched the show constantly for some time until I had to be off doing some other things and then came back towards the end of the run. But you always got oohs and ahs when you came out in that beautiful multicolor. I mean, like you could hear the women in the audience go, oh, ooh, wow, which I loved. I mean, that's you love that part of
Yeah, that has got to be the best feeling for a costume designer. And Kelsey, who did my hair every night, hand sewed it. And so she was so proud of it, and it was so cool. And I also think the lighting and it just like it was magical.
Yeah, you looked great. You wore everything well. So yeah, and then we really wanted to do the dichotomy between Paul and Corey. And obviously, Paul on the surface could come off a little bit like a stuffed shirt, but he really isn't. We learned soon enough that he...
Excuse me? I'm sorry, what?
Sorry, Brian. Not Brian, Paul. No, we did go with the whole, the man in the gray flannel suit, right? I mean, that was kind of that when Dean and I sat down and we chatted about it, we said, this guy has got to be, he should be sort of the, Peter Lawford mixed in with, somebody who's a little anal retentive in how they dress. So and Brian, stud muffin that he is, he comes out in this stuff. He looks like, a male model as well, or a male model, and he comes out and wanted him to just look professional. He's a young lawyer, but also have different variations so that as things disseminated in the play for the characters, that we were watching his progression, as a human being, as a character in the play. But I mean, that's kind of it. Now, this was fun. Dina and I went round and round on a couple of different things for Katrina, because this I thought was probably the most difficult in that we didn't want to say school marm. We didn't want to go so far in one direction to kind of stereotype mom too much, but instead, make sure that she came across as the professionally minded, bit of the doddering mother, bit of the classic Jewish mother who is going to shame you into doing what they want you to do. And I think that Neil Simon, he's written so many of these characters in that light, and we just wanted to be able to honor that. And of course, Katrina she worked those costumes beautifully, just like all of you did. But this was the one that I think we went back and forth on the most, was Ethel's costume. Of course, we get to V and outfits. We could go a little bit zanier with these and wanted to, and because we felt that he should be, he's got his outward appearance is an inward, tells a lot about who he is inside. So we went with some crazy ideas. We mixed up some things in here. At one time, we had him looking like a gangster, and I was like, I don't like that gangster look, because some of the things are described in the script, but I think what Neil Simon was intending at that time is different than, it would have had a different appearance in today, if playing it today. So we decided to kind of scrap some of what we were looking at in terms of what was given in the script and or implied by the script, and move in a different direction. But we just wanted to make sure that this was a dashing man who, while he's outrageous, is somebody that Ethel could fall for, and V certainly played that character to the hilt. So that was Velasco. Oh, was that rumors?
It was, but you don't have to talk.
I probably said enough on the costumes. What else did you ask me?
I had asked about the rehearsal process and how you approached it. How long did you spend at the table, and just a bit about how you approached the work.
Great, and I'll try to be brief because I know I don't want to eat up all the time.
Well, that's why we're here.
Yeah, well, I know, but I want to give a chat. But I don't really remember how long we sat at the table exactly. I don't think it was too long. I wanted us to be able to get up on our feet because it is a farce. You know, it is at the end of the day. The reason why I wanted to stay at the table though is to give everybody obviously an opportunity to not have to feel like they had to act, you know, and layer stuff on there too soon and just listen to each other more than anything else. And also something that Katrina alluded to, and many of you did. I mean, Brian, you mentioned it in terms of the rhythm. There's so much given in the way the text is written out on the page. The man was a genius. Neil Simon it was an absolute genius, master of the stage. And when I was in college in the 80s, people would foo-foo. Everybody wanted to work on Mamet and, you know, Sam Shepard, and all the young boys all wanted to say curse words on stage and do all that stuff. I saw the allure of some of that stuff, but I got to tell you, I was reading everything I could digest from Neil Simon back then. And even back then, I was like, this man is brilliant stagecrafter, brilliant writer. And if you look at the script and you just keep reading it, which is what I do whenever I act or direct, just keep reading it constantly, you'll get it. And you look at the punctuation, as Katrina said, it's really right. It's really right there. You look at what the rhythms are in the line. Sometimes what's being said, it's not so funny what is said, but how you say it, if you give the right lilt to it, then it's funny. So you know, you have that throughout the script. You have that throughout. So we really concentrated on that, Jason, on that. And then once we got on our feet, you know, we still held people to the right words. I mean, it's natural when you get up on stage, we all do it. You get going and you get into the zone. You know, I like to call it the zone when you're rehearsing. It's so much fun. It's like the best part of being an actor when you're there riffing off of your fellow castmates. It's so exciting, guys. I recommend it to everybody. When you're in that zone, you can say different things, but we always scale back and said, okay, well, now that's not what's being said here. And these guys, and I want to compliment all of you, everyone in this company was so diligent about making sure they were hitting the exact words, not paraphrasing. You know, it happens, but like me really being very militant to themselves to make sure they didn't do it. And then also observing the punctuation that was there. And, you know, as Katrina said, and many of you said, you do that. And V was nodding earlier. It's like, yep, it's all on the page. You get it. You don't have that luxury with a lot of different writers. You really don't. But with Neil Simon, if you let Neil Simon talk to you, he will, and he'll tell you how to play his material.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
One of the things that's interesting about you sitting there and looking at the words on the page and playing it off of the people with whom you're playing it, and listening to the responses of the audience at the same time, doing all of that at the same time, is that some things really work and some things work okay and some things are not working. But you can tell just by looking at the page that that's a setup and that's a tag. And if you're not getting it, you have to figure it out. That's your job. And for every single performance we did, Brendan and I sat down there every night and went through all the stuff. Every night, every single night, going, didn't get that. What do you think? I don't know. What do you think? You know, so it never stopped. It was a great joy in that regard.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we definitely were looking for when you do this play, when you do any Neil Simon, are the actors, you have to look for actors who have this in them. There's a rhythm to it, there's a brightness to it that we look for, and that is one of the reasons why we give out so much material, because if you get it once, it could be a fluke, right? But if you do 2 or 3 scenes and you can play that pattern throughout the play, and you show us that you can get that pattern, that's what we're looking for. And this particular group was really excellent at the Neil Simon tempo. So my hat's off to all of you.
Jason, can I interject one small?
Yes, please.
Brief with I will. But one of the selfish pleasures, I guess, of doing this show for me was I taught at FGCU for a short time, so local university here in Estero, south of Fort Myers, not far away from here. And, you know, I taught acting classes, and we had a scene study class, and I give out the scenes and I let the kids choose the scenes. Well, one of them was that famous scene of The Odd Couple, right? Where this is not a ladle, you know, and it's Oscar and Felix. And I learned very quickly that these young people that I was teaching had no idea about Neil Simon or what this material was, because I gave the kids the scene, and it was my first year teaching there, I think, and they got up and one of them was calling, you know, it's the Felix and Oscar from The Odd Couple, and the one student kept saying Oscar, 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 where are you, Oscar? And of course, you know, you don't laugh at, you know, they're children, so you know you're there to help them, not to mock them, right? But I quickly jumped into gear, and I made everybody in the class, everybody go. That was their homework assignment, that they had to go on YouTube and look up The Odd Couple and other Neil Simon. And here's why I think it's so important. You know, we talk about people, you know, like if you're a young musician, okay, and you're off to Juilliard, you know, and you're going to learn how to play, you're an organist, you're going to learn Bach, you know, or you're going to learn, you know, if you're playing cello, you're going to learn different pieces from time that go on. But we don't give that same respect to playwrights. You know, yeah, you're going to learn Beethoven, you're going to learn Mozart, you know, you're playing Shostakovich, you know, you're going to learn these different composers, but we don't necessarily do that for playwrights. And I just thought, what a shame, you know, that these kids will have not had that experience to know the delicacy and the wonderfulness of working on a Neil Simon play, especially a Neil Simon farce. And that was one of my guilty pleasures. I thought, wow, I hope some of these kids come out, and they did, you know, kids from the school come out to see those shows. And I just think that that's an interesting thing that we should not lose sight of, that these, you know, these writers over time, you know, they're not played the same way we would play in classical instruments, but they should be. That's my point. They should be. And this is an art form that, like, of course we had, you know, all these people, great artists working on this, these great performers, everybody got it and everybody knows it, but not everybody does. To speak to what you said, Jason, not everybody does, you know, and it has to be in the clay. It's got to be in the marble of the people that you bring into the room that understand that. And if they don't have that, they have to get that very quickly. But I think it's a lost art form that we shouldn't lose. And we got to make sure that we need to take care of our children and make sure that our children learn these things so that they can carry the torch. All right, I'm off my soapbox. Sorry for being.
Thank you, Greg. I also wanted to shout out, we talked about the set design and we talked about the costume design. Ray Recht, ensemble member, designed the set. Dina Perez, the costumes. Someone asked, I believe on Facebook, who was the lighting designer, and that was our longtime ensemble member, Todd O. Wren. Also shout out to Katie Lowe, the sound designer. The stage manager is Amy Masari, our ensemble member and resident stage manager. And then we had assistant stage managers, Casey Phillips, Rachel Van Pamel, who's one of our stage management interns this season, and an assistant director, Jesse Masari. So I just wanted to give a shout out to our whole creative team there. Also, I talked earlier, I just thought this would be interesting for those of you who have been coming here a long time. So we talked a bit about how Florida Rep has produced a number of Neil Simon plays in the past, and Barefoot in the Park was not one of them. But Florida Rep has produced Rumors, and Greg, you were in that production of Rumors the first time around, were you not?
That's correct. I was in the first production of it.
And then we produced it again, I believe, in 2011, and I have some images to share from that. And we've also, Florida Rep has produced the entire Broadway-bound Brighton Beach Memoirs Biloxi Blues trilogy. And I wanted to bring up some pictures because some of our audiences may or may not remember. So here are some pictures from Rumors. But Greg and I were in Broadway Bound together in 2006. So I figured it would be fun for our audiences to see. And there's the great Niels Miller also in Broadway Bound. But Greg and I played brothers in that show. So no strangers to Neil Simon's work here at Florida Rep. Any final words from our cast, from our panel? Anything at all you want to say to our audiences before we wrap it up for the day? final thoughts?
I've already said too much, but I love you guys. I love all of you. And thank you for all your support and everybody that's on the call today too. We greatly appreciate it. All right, I'm zipping it.
Thank you. And if you have any final questions on the panel or on Facebook, now's the time. Any final thoughts, Katrina or Mike or V or Brian, anyone?
Just thank you. It was great to revisit. It was great to revisit the show because it was a great experience, a wonderful script to work on, and a great group of artists. So this was really nice. Thanks.
And it's great to see your faces again.
Yes.
You know, on the one hand, it feels like 100 years ago, but on the other hand, none of us have done any work since then, so it's the last thing we did. So I missed you.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks for giving me a job today.
You're so very welcome. Well, thank you all so very much for joining us again for Florida Rep Stage at Home. Let's have one more virtual round of applause for our panelists. Thank you to the cast and to Greg. Thank you so much. All the tiles are clapping. We so appreciate you spending your afternoon with us. To our Stage at Home viewers, reminder that the past Stage at Home talkbacks, if you've missed one, they're all available on our YouTube page, our Facebook page, as well as our rebroadcasts as a podcast. So we're also a podcast, Stage at Home on Spotify, Google Playlists, Anchor, Breaker, and Radio Public. This week's episode will be available to watch very soon on Facebook, and we hope to see you here online next week as we talk about the creation of a new work for teens, Bulletproof Backpack by Eric Coble and spearheaded by our education director, Cody C. Jones. Florida Rep commissioned this play over a year ago as a piece for our conservatory program, and the play tackles school violence, and it was written from interview footage from teens about their experiences with school violence. The panel next week includes Cody C. Jones, our education director, the playwright Eric Coble, Dr. Laura Wright, who helped to develop the play, and two teens involved in the project, Danica Murray and Bryce Kingsley. So we hope you'll join us next week and for all of the planned episodes through June 12th, and look for that announcement coming soon. Everything is outlined on the news section of our website at floridarep.org. For updates, follow us on Facebook, make sure you're on our email list, and to visit the news section, again, like I said, at Florida Rep. So thank you all so much for spending the afternoon with us. And while we can't yet gather in the theater, we will see you there soon. So from all of us at Florida Rep, have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.